Well, welcome back to Step In, everyone. It's very exciting because we have reached double digits. This is episode 10, which is really, really awesome. And we're very excited because today we actually have a special guest. Usually we get to sit down with Mike, and today we actually get to be sitting down with George Franco, who is one of our overseers, as well as the person who preached on Sunday this past week. And so we get the opportunity to hear a little bit more about you, as well as a little bit of a deeper dive into your talk on Sunday. Yeah. But yeah, why don't you just give us a little maybe update for people who don't know who you are or who maybe weren't there on Sunday. So
yeah, great. Yeah. Well, I'm George, and I've been part of Southside Story for, we were talking about this the other day, weren't we, Taylor? Yeah. I always have a hard time remembering the date, but it seems like 20 years, but I think it's like 15 years maybe, somewhere in there.
Wow, that's amazing.
And I was introduced to Southside when they were trying to figure out what it would take to maybe buy a piece of land and maybe have a building one day.
Wow.
They were still meeting in the school. Southside was still meeting in the school. And I was at a large church in Charlotte. I was an executive pastor. We were a multi-site church. And I had started helping an organization called Enjoy. John Maxwell was the leader of it at the time. And they said, hey, we could use some of your help in helping churches figure out their vision and their strategy and how they grow. And the first assignment I got was going to a church in Canada. It was Connexus Community Church. Kerry Newhoff was the pastor at the time. And we had some great success. Some amazing things were happening. And so all of a sudden, one day, a guy who bought the company from John Maxwell, Joe Sangel, who I think is going to be here right in a couple of weeks, right?
Yeah, he is, yeah.
Yeah, Joe Sangel was a really good friend of mine. And he said, hey, we have this church in the other side of Canada. And he said, I'd love you to kind of come and help me with that. And so, yeah, I flew up and met Mike and the leadership team at the time. And it was interesting. Like, we just had a lot in common. Sometimes when you meet somebody for the first time, you're like, it feels like a long lost friend.
Right.
And Mike's always felt like that since then.
That's amazing.
Yeah. So we, I helped with the first campaign. It was called Bold. And it was really exciting. Mike was like, you guys, Southside was meeting in the hangar at the time. Like, we had a leadership meeting in the hangar, and Mike's like, how are we gonna encourage people that we need money for a building and land? And I'm like, well, one, you're meeting in the hangar, and there's not enough space for everybody.
Right. And just for these listening who don't know, it actually was a hangar.
Yeah.
Like, it's not just like a fun name. It was actually an old hangar.
It was. I thought it was really cool because I've never seen a church meet in a hangar before. But and so long story short, it was super successful. Like the people of Southside just showed up in great ways and sacrificially gave. And it just started the opportunity that one day when the land became available and the building opportunity was there, that there was resources already being built in advance for it. So I'm really thankful for, it's hard to imagine like that the reason that we're here today is because there were people that came before us. And there's so many great people from Southside over the years that have given sacrificially and come before us. And today we get to stand on those shoulders and be in the facility that we're in and reach the people that we reach, and ministry's really advanced for it. So
wow, that's amazing, George.
Yeah, that's really cool.
Yeah.
It sounds like you've had a long career in ministry, and I wanted to ask you to start things off. Are there any crazy stories that you would like to share with us from that time?
Crazy stories in ministry. Yes, I have lots of crazy stories. Most of them feel bad to some degree, a little bit, but one of them was we had a guy that used to come to one of our services in the Charlotte area, and he would just he was so into worship all the time. He would stand in the back of the room and he would start dancing around and have his hands lifted. And I'm like, I've never seen anybody in my life. You needed to give him space, like 3 or 4 chair spaces. He needed that much space. And I'm like, he's really into worship. It's crazy. And I found out that he was actually taking LSD before he came to church.
Oh my word.
And the lights actually triggered the LSD to have a greater impact on his
high.
On his high.
Oh my goodness.
So church was enabling him to experience their high. So we had to work on that. We had to work on that situation a little bit. Yeah.
That's so funny.
I've had
holy smokes! I was not expecting you to go there.
Yes, I mean it's. I think one of the stories I told at Southside too is I went to a new church in the Raleigh-Durham area, and it was my first weekend. And my wife and we attended the first service together. And a staff member texted me during the service, and he goes, "Hey, who's in charge of breaking up fights?" And I was like, "You are." And he goes, "Ha ha ha." And I was like, they're hazing me. I'm getting hazed my first weekend, on the job. And a few minutes later, the bubbles pop up on my phone again. He goes, no, seriously, who's in charge of breaking up fights? And I'm like, is there a fight taking place? And he said, there's about to be one on the patio. And I'm like, what? And so I jump up out of service. I go running through the doors. We had this big lobby area, and I'm looking through the lobby, and I'm looking outside, and there's a police officer, and he's standing watching a guy and a woman, and they're arguing pretty intensely about it. And everybody's just watching. Nobody's trying to intervene or do anything. And I go walking through the lobby as fast as I can, bust through the front doors, walk straight past the officer. I'm zeroed in on this giant guy. He's big, and the lady he's talking to is small, and her back is to me, and he's facing towards me. And as I get close to her, she turns and she goes, I'm not having anything to do with it. And she turns to walk away from him, and he grabs his hand and like he's reaching out. I don't know if he's going to hit her or grab her or pull her or what. And I slide right over the top of her, put my hand out, and I grabbed his hand and said, hey, I'm Pastor George. It's nice to meet you today.
Incredible entrance.
I held the hand as hard as I could, because if he's swinging with the other one, I've got something for leverage. And it was crazy. It's a crazy story because it was hot. They were very heated, and we were able to separate them for a little bit of time, get them apart, and things began to calm down. And an interesting thing is, like 4 months later, they asked me if I would marry them.
Oh, wow.
And so it's you go from these highs and lows because people are going through life and they show up at church and life is still going on, and you find yourself in the middle of some of those.
Yeah, that's wild,
things.
George.
Yeah.
I do know there's an infamous story about a camel that I'm sure that people would love to hear
You want
about.
to hear the story about a camel?
we do.
Okay. All right.
I'm still unaware of this story, so I'm really
some people have had the
curious
privilege to hear
All
it,
right.
but I'm sure there's many, most people listening have not. So
You can find the story on YouTube.
Oh, wow.
You can
So
watch
this
the
is a
video.
public story
Yep,
already.
it is public. Yes. So we worked in an environment where the senior pastor oftentimes would change the game plan at the last minute. So we'd set the game plan all week long, and on a Saturday night, he might audible and say, hey, I came up with this great idea in the middle of the night after dinner usually. And so I was like, okay, what's the idea? And he's like, I want to put a camel on stage tomorrow. It's easier for a rich man to get into heaven than a camel to pass through the eye of the needle was the passage he was going to speak on. And my production guy calls and says, no, we can't let him do it. It's a bad thing. And at one of my previous ministries, we had tried to bring a camel in at Christmas time, and run through, the camel got scared by the music and kicked a TV across the room, like literally put his foot through it. No.
Sorry. Sure, she's new, you guys. It's
I put it on airplane mode.
oh, it's all right. Okay, back to the story. We need to hear this camel.
Yeah. So anyway, the camel kicked the TV across the room, and so I was like, I went back to the senior guy and I was like, hey, it's a bad idea.
Where do you get a camel from?
They're out there.
There's the
People have
story.
camels. Yeah, you got to know a guy.
Okay.
You have to have a camel guy, Taylor.
So I need to find a camel guy.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's crazy.
Yeah, if you have a camel guy. So apparently where this guy found a camel was there's a guy that does weddings, and people, certain cultures like camels at weddings. And so he would take this camel to weddings. And so my pastor's like, no, he does weddings and there's loud music and it'll be fine. It'll be just fine. I'm like, it's there for a lot of reasons. It's a really bad idea. And we couldn't get him to change his mind. And so then we had to come up with a plan. How we're going to get a camel on stage? Well, we had a large door in the back to get a camel through. Now, a camel, when it uses the bathroom, literally pees about 8 gallons in 1 minute or
It's
less.
like a lot of big gulps, slurpee stuff.
And so you guys
That's a
know,
lot of big gulps.
here at Southside, the stage has a lot of electronic equipment, a lot of wires and stuff, and 8 gallons of water at one time could really create a problem. So we were trying to figure out how do we protect all the equipment and everything else. And the only thing we could come up with is we had our facilities guy with a Rubbermaid tote. And his job was to stand by, and if the camel indicated that he might use the bathroom, is to slide the tote underneath the camel to try and capture all 8 gallons. And so Camel Joe, pastor comes out, starts preaching the message. Camel Joe comes out with his trainer, and the camel really likes animal cookies. So the trainer's just feeding him animal cookies. The camel's doing fine. But when the camel gets out on stage, he's afraid of the crowd, and he turns his back to the crowd, which means that his butt is facing the crowd. And so his butt is actually by the senior pastor's face. So in the lockdown shot that you're seeing the whole time while he's teaching, it's a camel's butt and it's the pastor's face the whole time. And so pastor does a good job trying to get through his part of the message. And then it's time for the camel to leave, and the camel does not want to leave the stage. He doesn't want to go. And so the trainer starts pulling on him, and the camel says, no, I'm not going. He digs in and he takes a step backwards. Well, he's backing up towards the audience and towards the front of the stage. And so the guy's like pulls on the camel again. The camel takes another step backwards, and he's like inches away from going off the stage. And so now the senior pastor is like, give him some crackers, give him some cookies. He likes the cookies.
That poor person walked into church for the very first time that day and sat front row.
Front row.
They just got camel butt all up in their face.
Yes, camel butt up in the face. And so the trainer pulls one more time, and the camel backs off the stage.
Oh boy.
And his back legs are down on the ground. His front legs are up on the stage. And the front row of people are now scattering. But we live in the age of, hey, we got to capture the experience, right? So everybody pops out their cell phones, and they're all taking selfies with the camels behind. And we're trying to get them out of the way, because if the camel kicks anybody, I mean, it could be lights out type thing. So you see me come from behind stage, come out. I cleared the front rows of people. I actually told the trainer, let's get the camel down on the ground, right? Because at this point, we're not going to get him back up on the stage. And so now we have a camel loose in the auditorium with all the people, and everybody's trying to get a camera shot. And I'm like, I looked at the pastor. I was like, we got to get people out of here. Pray, get us out of here. So while he's praying, I'm looking at the camel trainer. I'm like, how do we get him out of here? And he says, I don't think we can. And I'm like, what do you mean? And he said, all the doors in the room are 8 foot tall, and a camel will not go through an opening that's lower than its hump. And I'm like, what do you mean he won't go through the doors? He said, I don't think he'll do it. I'm like, well, what are we going to do? And he goes, I don't know. And I said, well, what have you done in the past? And he goes, it's never happened before. And so pastor prays, we get everybody out of the room, we turn the lights down, we turn the music off, so it's nice and quiet and peaceful for the camel. The camel's now disturbed and decides to run across the room. And as he runs across the room, his stomach's a little anxious, and he's dropping camel poop everywhere.
What was that one guy with the toad bucket?
Yeah, you can't catch diarrhea in a bucket.
Oh, okay.
Like the camel's on the move. So now there's camel diarrhea all the way across the room, and it's a wide room. And we've got 30 minutes before the next service starts. And the next people come in, and I have a camel that's loose, chairs are out of the way, camel poop everywhere. It stinks really bad. And I'm like, I don't know what we're going to do. And so we got a game plan together. We opened up these doors, and we said, hey, if we get the camel running, maybe the camel will finally just take a duck and go through the door. And it actually did work. The camel ducked, went through the door. We got him outside. We were actually doing baptisms that day, which were outdoor baptisms. So there's this video of a camel eating leaves on a tree next to the baptismal. But two things I learned that day is one is volunteer leaders are amazing, because while I was trying to get the camel out of the room, our facilities team came in, and their idea was to bring those totes full of water, hot water, throw them across the carpet of the room and saturate it so much with water. And then they had shop vacs, and they were sucking up camel poop and water as fast as they could. And then they Febrezed it like crazy, a lot of Febreze that day, and reset the room. And for the people that came in the next service, it was virtually impossible, other than a lot of Febreze, to know that anything had happened.
That is insane.
Yeah,
that is actually one of the craziest stories.
But they took the initiative on their own to do that. It wasn't me that had to instruct them or guide them to do it. So it's amazing.
So what was the debrief like?
Oh boy,
it was hard, because here's how God takes difficult things and turns them into good things. Is that somebody went to work the next day, and a local radio station, a rock station that plays, it's not a Christian station that plays Christian music, a rock station, they were telling the DJs what happened at their church. And they're like, what? We need to get this pastor in the studio. And so the next day they had the pastor in the studio, and they're like, hey, we want to go to a church that puts camels on stage and creates chaos. Like, that's really cool. Like, why did you do that? What was the importance of it? And his whole idea was creating a picture for people to see what God was trying to tell them in his word. And it just went a little sideways. But thousands and thousands of people heard about our church and what our willingness was to be able to share the message of Jesus with them. So that's cool. It turned out good in the moment. Didn't feel so great, but
Well, I mean, probably no more camels ended up on the stage, did they?
No more camels.
But I have some incredible youth ideas now that we can put into swing.
That's awesome.
Let me know you're a camel guy, and then we'll talk.
I'll give you his number.
I appreciate that.
That's awesome, George. Something that, I mean, even in that story, first of all, you're so incredibly positive and you're so focused on people. Something that struck me about your message is when you were talking about your snow shoveling. And not only were you like, oh, like I had these neighbors and I wanted to help them, you knew all of those neighbors, right? Like you knew all of their stories. And so I think that that's pretty unusual. Yeah. That not only do not only are you friendly with your neighbors, but you actually know them. And I really think that that's so amazing. And I want to hear kind of from you, what inspired you or motivated you to really invest in and get to know the people like physically around you, like at your home.
Yeah. Well, I haven't always been that way. And I think, that's the part of growth in life. Like there's these places where we're not great at certain things. And when, I worked in the marketplace for a long, long time and then became a pastor. And the executive pastor role is perfect for a marketplace person. There's a lot of business principles that you would use in an executive pastor role. But as I leaned into my executive pastor role, there was a time where we focused on the story of the Good Samaritan and what that would really mean to our church in modern day times. And some of that is knowing the people around you and caring for the people around you. And I remember I spent pretty much a whole year just driving around our community because I'm like, I live here, but I don't really know it. Like someone said, well, what if we did a cookout at a park? Like, where would we do that? And I'm like, well, I mean, there's this park. And they're like, yeah, but I mean, that's not representative of our community necessarily. It's just kind of where people show up occasionally. It's not integrated into the community. And so I started driving around and I found a lot of little parks that I've never been to and maybe a lot of people have never been to because they're in parts of the community that not everybody goes. And then I started to find out there's places that, feed people and care for people outside of the church ministry. I found there's a lot more churches that were like our church that care about people, but I didn't know them because I just knew our church. And so I started really digging into the community and what my neighbors really looked like and who they were. And it challenged me to really dig in and say, on my own street, like I'm busy at work. Like I worked 80 hours a week in general when I was in the marketplace. And so you leave early in the morning, your garage door comes up, you back out, you go to work and you come home late at night. It's dark. You pull into your garage, you shut the door and you want to rest. You want to, I never really found the opportunity to rub shoulders or get to know who my neighbors were. And so as in ministry, what it began teaching me that year was to open my eyes and see the people that are right next to me every single day. And it kind of relates to the message this past weekend, but this is the field and the place that God's planted me, and I'm missing the opportunity that he's put right next to me. And so good, George. As my wife and I, we've moved a couple of times, and as we've moved, we've really kind of dug into really knowing who our neighbors are. And one of the things I love where we live right now, we just moved there a year ago, is that there's multiple widows in our neighborhood. And I've been really challenged to say, what does God say about the widows? What's my opportunity? Not just responsibility, because sometimes responsibility makes you feel like I have to go do this. And I think I even said that in the message. I can't let her go shovel her driveway on her own. But I'm like, but she doesn't have anybody to help her shovel her driveway. And so I'm like, I want to be the person that helps her. I want to be the person that cares for her. I want to be the person that she can count on. And so my wife and I've really enjoyed, like one of the ladies on the street recently had the flu really bad. And Tara made homemade chicken noodle soup for her and took it down. And there's a lot of things you could have made quick. You could have DoorDashed or Uber Eats something to her, but Tara's like, no, I'm going to make her a homemade meal. And I'm like, I just love that part of who we've become. But it takes work and intentionality.
That's very cool. Yeah. I was going to ask, because you said you and Tara moved a few times. When you move into a new space or community, are there a few things that you intentionally do at the beginning to start those relationships? Are there any keys that you focus on, or is it just time?
We always try to be friendly. We try to treat people the way that we would want to be treated. And so, some of the times we moved, we had a pet, and pets can make it easy because you go to the dog park together or you're walking your dog and you admire somebody else's pet and you have a conversation. The pet helps bring common ground to you guys right away. This last neighborhood that we moved to is a new neighborhood. It's just built. So everybody that's moving in is new. And so it's been kind of fun to be able to say, hey, we're all new here together. Like, let's hang out. And so, I don't know, they've got a book club started, and then,
awesome.
we did a Christmas party, and some of us hang out together from time to time, but part of it's just being out and being available. So like, you can't just pull into the garage and shut the door and go into your house and sit down. You actually have to make yourself available to be able to have conversations. And I've also realized that in that you, sometimes I feel like it's more about wanting people to like me, but I've also realized that people feel the same way. They're like, I'm not sure if people like me. And so I'm always trying to be friendly to people, to let their guard down a little bit, that I have no secret motives here. I just want to be a good neighbor to you. And so the snow shovel example is interesting because I've had it for 25 years, and we've been in 3 different neighborhoods. And in every neighborhood I've been in North Carolina, nobody has a snow shovel.
That's awesome.
So I moved from Ohio, which was a very snowy state. We got a lot of snow there, and that's why I have a legitimate, really good snow shovel. But so one of the things that I do too is I leave my snow shovel on the front porch, and I tell all the neighbors, hey, if we get snow and you need to get out, and I'm not available to help you or whatever, the snow shovel's on the front porch. Just grab it and use it, but put it back because one of our other neighbors is probably going to want to use it too. And so I don't know, made it my deal, but I've made it an opportunity to share what I have with my neighbors and try and help them by the simple thing of just putting a snow shovel on the front porch when it snows. So
that's awesome, George.
it takes a little bit of thought, and it takes
a
little bit of practice, but
I like that. Are we ready to dive into your talk a little bit more? I have a few questions. Okay. So you specifically brought up talking about the parable of the weeds, and you highlighted the tension between truth and deception. And I wanted to ask you, where do you see that most commonly in culture today?
Yeah, it's kind of hard. Like, you really have to think about it. I think it's easy to say good and bad. Like, we see good and bad in our culture, and we have different definitions of what good is, and some of us have different definitions of bad. When I think of truth and deception, I immediately go back to the garden in Genesis, right? Like, you have God's truth, and He created everything, and it was good, right? And He had a plan and a purpose for man in the garden, but the enemy came only to deceive what God was saying. He wanted to take the truth that God had for Adam and Eve, and He wanted to bend it and say, well, you could be like God too if you would eat of the fruit. Like, God's not protecting you from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. He's actually keeping something to Himself, something away from you. So what Satan's saying is, it's actually not God's best for you. He didn't give you everything good. He gave you mostly good stuff. And the enemy's opportunity was to come in and say, oh, that's not true. Like, listen to this lie. And if you can believe this lie, it would destroy the harvest of mankind, because we would separate ourselves from God. And the enemy knew it. So, truth and deception is it's one of those challenging things to try and figure out. Like, I think sometimes where I see it being played is that sometimes people say, I believe in a higher power, right? But what the higher power is and how it's made up is deceptive in nature. And so, I don't know, like, where would you see it with youth right now? Like,
I think there's a lot of, like, I think this is a very, very common deception, but I just think that idea of like tangible things will fulfill you. I know that's very, very broad, but I think that that's a lot of the time where maybe our youth gets stuck on, like maybe popularity is going to fulfill you. And I think that's where a lot of deception has impacted our youth, specifically with social media and how we present ourselves. Like, if we present that perfect image, then you will be fulfilled. And so I think deception in what actually fulfills us is maybe the biggest, the biggest loss that we're having right now is in that area. Yeah. What do you think, Spence?
Yeah, I mean, I love what you said, George, about like the higher power piece. I think is really key. And it's even like I've noticed that even just in conversations within our church of people who are Christians, or like they've put their faith in Jesus, but they have left certain parts of their life away from God, essentially, right? And like, there's that deception of like, oh, well, it's not that big of a deal. Like, I remember talking with someone like, oh, it's just that faith thing that's like And it's just funny. It's like, it's not like just that faith thing, right? Like it's like the deception is like, oh, well, like it's not that big of a deal. Or like, oh, it's not that big of a deal, but it's like, no, it's actually a big deal. Right. And so I think that it is interesting because I think it's very, very subtle. And I think a lot more subtle than, a serpent showing up in a tree. Right? Like
definitely. Right.
It would be a lot easier if it was that obvious. But it's, I think, just so much more subtle, where it's the little compromises, that take you away from what's true. And I mean, you talked about it on Sunday a little bit, right? Where like the Darnell wheat, it looks like like wheat, right? Like it's very similar, but it's just it's just a counterfeit, right? Like that, like the enemy can only make counterfeits of what God can make. And I think that, at least for me, I feel like I'm seeing a lot of people fall for counterfeits, and a lot of it is like just with the trust of God, right? In certain areas where it's like, oh, like, if I actually, God's way isn't necessarily best. Maybe they don't say it that way, right? But they actually believe that, oh, like God's way maybe isn't the best way for me. And so I'll just, this other way that looks kind of like it is more appealing.
Right.
Because it doesn't require that trust.
I like that a lot.
Yeah. Anything else to add, Tay?
No, I like what you said a lot. I think, that idea of like, there's two things that are specific to me that I think when you say like we're settling for counterfeit and not saying that God's way is actually the best way, is like in money and relationships. Those are the things that are most key for me, at least, that I realize. I think money, an example of that would just be like the tithe, saying like maybe 6% or whatever it is good enough. Right. Again, that same word. And then in relationships, it's like, I don't know, whether your significant other isn't a Christian or something like that. Well, I'm working on it or whatever. Like, well, you're in that dating area, or like, I don't know, sex before marriage is another one where it's like, well, it's not the end of the world kind of thing. And I like what you said a lot. When we start slipping just a little bit, like that's a lot less obvious than a serpent in a tree, but that's where it starts to compound over time.
Yeah. And I think maybe today it's a lot more about being deceived that you're more trustworthy than God is. Right? Because like, with even like the stuff and like the providing for yourself via career or whatever, I think that's very like, oh, well, I'm actually more trustworthy than God is. Like my effort will actually earn what I want versus trusting God in these areas won't.
I agree. I mean, it is interesting how the deceiver, right, tricks us a little bit because I've heard you guys talk about these things before when I've been here at Southside, but like sometimes as Christians, we can take pieces of God's word and insinuate what it's saying. And so like one of the ones on money is that money's evil.
Right.
And that's not what God's really saying. It says for the love of money is the root of all evil, right? And so when we love money, we actually are elevating money above our love for God. We're beginning to worship money instead. And so the worship of money is definitely evil. It's bad for us. That's not what God intended for us. But if we're not careful, we begin to, the deceiver begins to make us think certain things about God's truth that aren't really truth per se. And we're deceived. And so truth and deception occupy the same space, and we're left in the spot to really make sure that we understand what the truth is.
Yeah, totally.
And I think in today's culture, it sometimes feels harder and harder to tell what the truth really is.
Well, I mean, and I mean, like very practically, like I even think of like AI stuff on Instagram, which is just so like the stupid things that are like, just like, it's just like a dumb clip of like, you know what I saw today was a video of a dog stealing a catalytic converter from a car. And like, it's like an AI video. I'm like, this is the stupidest thing I've ever seen. And it's like, but it's like getting to the point that people are like not believing or trusting anything. Right. And so like, I think that's makes it really, really tricky.
Really good.
And so I think that when, I don't know, maybe they even read the Bible and they're like, I don't know if I believe this. I don't know if I can trust this, which I feel like is probably one of the biggest questions that young people and young adults are asking is like, can I trust God? Not necessarily is God real? Right. Like I think that they believe, like you said, there's a greater power or a higher power. I think that's maybe most people's belief who aren't Christians would be like, there's something.
Sure.
I just don't know. I don't know what to believe or what to trust. And I mean, that's such a challenge, right? To navigate truth and deception, not even as someone who doesn't believe in Jesus, but as someone who believes in Jesus. And that's why I do really love what you said on Sunday, where you talked about like, God is the good sower. He only sows good seed, and he's very intentional. Right, you're placed where you are. And then you talked about how the seed's responsibility is not to plant yourself anywhere, right? Like your responsibility is to focus on growth. And so I would love to hear from you, to anybody who's listening, because I think that that's like key, even to like the truth and deception piece is like, you need to focus on growth and make that your priority. What would you tell somebody in terms of like maybe one next step on how they can grow or how they can focus on growth themselves?
Yeah, I think our goal in growth is to find closer proximity to God, like to be in His presence more often. And so I haven't been able to listen to all the elements, all the messages of Step In, but I've heard parts of it. And so we would say sometimes we call them spiritual disciplines, but maybe they're spiritual practices or habits that we get in. Like one of my habits today, it's going to sound so silly, but I use the Bible app and YouVersion. I am so intent on making sure that for 365 days, my streak is alive. Now I have weeks and weeks. I have lots of years of weeks that are alive, but I've missed days inside of there where I wasn't in my Bible app. Now it's not such a religiosity type thing to me, but what I'm trying to say in my life is my priority is that when I open my eyes, my first contact is with God, my Creator. I love that, Church. And most of the time that happens, my wife isn't even awake yet. She's still asleep over there, and I'm trying to be quiet. I put my AirPods in, I got my phone out, and I'm just sitting there listening to what God has to say to start my day. And I'm so fanatical about it right now that a couple of times the app didn't record it right, and I sent them an email and said, "Hey, can you update my streak?" That's awesome. Because it just helps me stay on track of making sure that I stay in the presence of God. And so, I know people do it different ways, and I'm not trying to necessarily say this is the way you have to do it. Sure. But for me, starting the day with God has been really good. For some people, maybe you need that cup of coffee before you can really connect and hear from God first. And people, I think through my life, I've learned that being a pastor, sometimes when you tell people how you do it, they think that's how they're supposed to do it. But one of the pastors that I admire a lot, his name's Larry Osborne. And Larry, I was sitting with Larry one time. He came and spoke at our church. And Larry said, what's really interesting is I wake up every morning and I have a place where I go and sit and I read my Bible and spend time with God. And he said, you should look at my Bible. I mean, it's underlined and highlighted and notes in the margin. And he said, man, I get to work with God, type thing. And I'm like, yeah. And he goes, and my wife, she has no highlights, no underlining. And he said, but if I were to say who has a closer walk with God, I think it's my wife. Like he said, the time that she does spend with God and the way that she spends it uniquely connects her with her Creator. Wow, and he said the importance isn't exactly what you do in that time, it's that you have that time together. And so the quiet time, it quiets the noise so that it's the voice of God that you hear in your life, not the TV or the phone ringing during a podcast.
It's all right. We'll forgive you, George. Well, that's amazing. I really love that. I mean, I think that's so important to be said, right? That like, I do think people try to shoehorn something into their life because they've heard it from somebody else. Right. And there is the tendency, I think, to try to earn our way to God, right? Through, maybe that's the right way and that's what I have to do. And knowing that like God works with your personality, right? He works with your, regular, your personal proclivity of like, maybe you're not a morning person, right? Like he's not like wanting to force you to have the most dozy experience with him ever, right? Like he's like, maybe do it over lunchtime, right? Or like, like I love what you said, where it's like almost anything is better than nothing, right? And like he wants to spend time with you. And so I just love that, George. That's really good.
I think I have a thought on that as well. When I hear like focus on growth, I think a lot of the time personally I focus on like the outcome of growth more so than like the process.
Yeah, that's really good, Taylor.
Like something that is like happening right now is my mom, she just started planting tomato seeds and she has them in our kitchen. And it's been like a few weeks now and I'm like, gang, nothing is happening. I mean, like they've just been sitting there. But then
in 2 weeks, you expected tomatoes to grow in 2
weeks. I was kind of open, so I wanted some. Awesome. But like finally, like there's a little bit of a sprout coming out. And like when you say like you want that streak of 365 days, like if you just did that for 3 weeks, like nothing obvious will happen. But once you get to 365, you might have a few verses that you memorized versus prior to that you don't. I think the gym is another very good example. And so like when we go through these spiritual practices and we're like, I'm going to spend 5 minutes in silence and God better reveal something incredible to me. And then it's a little discouraging because we think, oh, well, nothing happened. So he's obviously not speaking to me. So yeah, I don't know. I just thought that that's very real for me right now. Is just focusing more on the process of growth instead of the outcome of growth.
And I mean, George, you like touched on that so good on Sunday. Like the Bible's so cool, right? Like the reality that like in that parable that Jesus is talking about, and he's like, oh, like wait for it to grow before you do anything. And like, it could just be like, oh, like just so you can see the weeds, but it's like, oh no, like, because over time only at the very end is when the fruit happens. And like, I mean, it's like with what Taylor's talking about, like, I just love that, right? That it's the reality of time and consistency is what actually produces the fruit, right? Because like, if you were to, like in the parable, if they like harvested the wheat early, right? There's no fruit. Yes. Right. It's just an empty stalk. And so I don't know. That's really good, Tay. I love that a lot.
I was early in my ministry career. We had this outdoor baptismal at the church, and the Carolinas, it's always warm enough to baptize outside for the most part. And so we would create it into a fountain during the day. Like we had a special pump and a little attachment we put on and it'd be a fountain. It was really nice. And so I would show up at the church early in the morning before anybody ever got there. And I grabbed my Bible and I would go out and sit by the fountain and spend my time with God. And it was special. Right. It was really special. Like I heard God speak and say a lot of things to me. And then I remember there's this time, it was a while ago, Francis Chan had come out with this book, Crazy Love. And I was digging the book and I was doing my quiet time and I was talking to God about some of the things I was reading in this book. And I'd go out to the fountain and I would talk to God and I didn't hear anything. I'm like, well, wait, I'm in the right spot. It's I'm right on time, God. Like you're supposed to show up here.
That's awesome.
And it was weeks. And I didn't hear God say anything to me. And I'm like, finally one day I like put the book down and the Bible down. I'm like, God, like I'm doing all my stuff right. Like what's up with your end of the deal? And I'm like really kind of ranting to God about this. And when I got done, I sat there and I'm like, well, I guess he's not going to say anything. And he said 2 simple things. He said, I'm here. And I'm like, oh yeah. I started coming here just to quiet everything down and be in the presence of God. And I needed him to do something to prove that he was there every day. But he's like, I haven't gone anywhere.
Right.
I'm still right here with you. And so sometimes I think those habits and disciplines for us, that consistency is really, really good. And sometimes I think it takes us in a spot where we expect God to begin doing certain things at the same time. But what the thing that God really taught me, and the thing that God always does, is he's always faithful. And so I think when we develop some of those disciplines and habits in life, that we'll see God's faithfulness over and over again. And we were talking about this the other day, Taylor. It was in the Bible app, right? It was he's always faithful.
Yeah,
he's going to be there to protect you and to strengthen you from the evil one, the devil.
Oh, yeah.
And
That's
so I'm like, those are places where you're in that time with God that you really, the roots go deeper during that time. And so, yeah.
That's good.
Yeah.
I have one last question for you before we close out.
Okay.
Related to your talk, you were talking about how there's good seed and there's bad seed, and how God plants good seed and the enemy plants bad seed, and how we are the seeds. And so my question is, does that mean that some of us are from the enemy and some of us are from God?
That's a tough one. Because at first glance, you would say that the devil's planting evil people. Like there's demons out there running around. And
he's like that camel on Sunday, right?
Yeah, he was definitely.
How was a demon planted in there?
Yes.
Sure. Yeah.
In church, by church people, by we. It's an interesting thing, because if we read too much into scripture, sometimes it can take us down a path that's not too far. I tend to look at that in a more simplified way, that the only difference between the seed of weed and the seed of wheat is that someone hasn't believed who Jesus really is.
Right.
And so what happens is the people that haven't believed in who Jesus is, Satan's strategically placing them all around the wheat, right? Because if those people can get the wheat to begin doubting, then he begins to destroy the harvest. And then the harvest, the wheat's opportunity is to really be wheat around the weeds. And so if we're bearing fruit, and if we're growing, at some point, the people who haven't made a decision to follow Jesus say there is a difference. Even though we, I look nice and you look nice, and I have a good job and you have a good job, and I get a good performance review and you get a good performance review, and I gave money to the food kitchen and you gave money to we look the same on the outside, but down on the inside, there's something definitely different. And one of my favorite things about that is that from the moment in time that Adam and Eve sinned, God could have eliminated evil immediately. From the moment that Satan became Satan and chose to separate himself from God. God could have eliminated evil, but God's allowed time to happen. And in that time, his hope and desire deeply is that everybody would believe who he is, that they would be restored back to a relationship with him. And so throughout time, he's allowed the weed and the wheat to grow, the weeds and the wheat to grow together. And because his hope is that at some point, someone who doesn't know him will actually come to know him. And it's our opportunity to show them God's goodness and faithfulness as wheat. Doesn't mean we're perfect. In fact, Mike and I were talking about this today a little bit, but I'm like, man, sometimes when somebody's driving slow in front of you and you're like, I want to get out of the car and key their car or pull them out of the car and give them the business, like all of a sudden you're like, whoa, that's like, should a Christian be doing that? And, what kind of behavior? And like, if I think those things and I want to do those things and have those thoughts, then are those the things I should be doing? And the enemy brings shame right into our life, heavy right away. And then what happens is a person who doesn't know Jesus looks at it and goes, well, you're no different than I am. Like you have the same feelings. So the opportunity that we have as wheat, and this is where the growth comes, is in those moments we have an opportunity where the Holy Spirit inside, he signals, like we've all done something wrong as followers of Jesus. The Holy Spirit signals inside and says, that's not what Jesus would do. That's not the way Jesus has called you to live. You're lower in your game. You need to elevate your game to where Jesus wants you, and he's going to help you do that. And so that's how we put anger aside. It's how we begin to work on depression and all those things that become obstacles and hurdles in our life. And the wheat's working on it. When you work on those things through the strength and power of the Holy Spirit in our lives, then we actually grow. We get stronger. And it's pretty powerful to think about. And so, I don't think weeds, I was trying to be really careful yesterday with that I don't want people to think that just because you might identify as a weed, all that means is that you haven't yet made a decision to say that Jesus came to live and die for me and close that separation between God and me forever. So
that's so good, George.
Awesome.
Yeah, that's great.
Thank you so much, George. I really appreciate your time and coming out to hang out with Spencer and I. Well, thank you guys so much for listening. I think a key takeaway for me was just that idea of focusing less on where we're planted and focusing more on the only thing we really can do, and that's grow. So thank you guys for tuning in. We look forward to seeing you guys next week with Step In.